Good evening. As you all know already, my topic tonight is on self-denial. How many of you denied yourself of something today already? It's not a trick question. If you didn't, I don't know if you're human. Michael's not sure. I think we all did, subconsciously or consciously. I know I did. I denied myself of something that I really like, and that was sleep this morning, to get up and study. But that's okay. Sometimes we have to do that for God's kingdom. To do His work, we are called to deny self. What does self-denial mean? It can be a biblical interpretation of it, or Webster's, or
Thinking of it, I thought of self-sacrificing.
Anyone else have any?
Jesus said we're to deny ourselves and pick up our cross. So we'd be denying ourselves of our fleshly desires.
Yep. Webster's definition would say a restraint or limitation of one's own desires or interests. The act of not allowing yourself to have or to do something you want. As most of you know, or you all know, that's not easy to do. We like to have what we want. Some biblical definitions of self-denial. Dad mentioned one already, of taking up our cross and following Him. I'll look at a couple verses that have to do about self-denial. They'll seem like they're repeating themselves, but that's fine. Matthew 10:39 says, "He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it." Matthew 16:25 talks about, "For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it." Mark 8:34 and 35. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, "Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it." Luke 9:23 and 24. And he said to them all, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it." John 12:25. "He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal." It sounded very repetitious there, but I found it interesting how self-denial is talked about in all four Gospels. There's only a few things in the Bible that are mentioned in all four Gospels, and self-denial is one of them. I think it was mentioned a total of about 7 times, roughly, in the Gospels. That shows that self-denial was at the center of what Jesus was teaching. If it's not for self-denial, we cannot follow Him. Is denying self an option in our Christian life? Is denying self an option?
Depends what you're talking about.
Explain a little more.
Christian life, you still eat food, but what are you referring to? I mean, our bodies need food, but we also need spiritual food.
Mm-hmm. In other words, I guess I was thinking more down the line of, can we make it to heaven, or can we follow Jesus without denying self?
We're born with Adamic nature, that has to be denied.
Mm-hmm.
You were reading there a number of verses there about taking up the cross. What does that mean? I didn't see you carry a wooden cross in there tonight. I'd like to know what it is, though. I mean, it's not important in all the Gospels, what a person, what is meant by take up the cross?
Okay.
I think the cross is something, somebody goes to the cross, whether the thieves or whoever, there's death.
Mm-hmm. What some of y'all think? What is our cross that we have to take up?
Is that when somebody irritates me, I gotta have the right attitude? Is that part of it? I mean, he said it's different for everybody.
Well, that's
Different people rub us different, I understand that. Back to the question.
most likely you have to deny self at that moment when people rub you the wrong way, because your first instinct would probably be to say some unkind words. What does it mean to take up our cross?
Well, they said it was different for everybody. I think there's a part of it that's the same for everybody, and that's kneeling at the cross of Calvary in our salvation experience. It's giving up our own personal desires, whatever that is, giving it over to God and giving Him control of our life. So the cross spells death, and so death is what needs to happen to our selfish desires.
Yeah. That's where it all
So then
starts.
If you don't die to self, you're not a Christian.
Exactly. That wouldn't be too rough.
Well, then you get angry, then you're not a Christian, right?
You have to die to self, right?
We have to die to self to be a Christian. Jesus never gave it an option, when he said those verses. They're not in question form. He's not like, if you want to, you can do this, or saying that you can halfway do it. He's making a statement. It's not even totally a commandment. He's making a statement. That's just the way it is. He said, if you want to follow me, you have to take up your cross, and you have to lose your life. And that doesn't always, when we read that, it doesn't make sense. But life is a paradox. It's a statement that is seemingly contrary or opposed to common sense, and yet is perhaps true. It doesn't really make much sense when we say that if a man will save his life, he needs to lose it first. But if you want to lose your life, for my sake, the same shall save it. If you want to lose your life, you have to try to save it here on earth. The way to retain life is to lose it, and the way to lose it is to selfishly cling to it. Life in heaven with Jesus is only for those that choose to deny self here on this earth. Is denying self an easy thing to do?
Depends a little on the circumstances. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Or at least that's the way I found it.
Mm-hmm. I'd say most times it's probably not. I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, why not? Why isn't it easy to deny ourselves? Well, it's the very core being that is fighting against us. It's our flesh that is fighting against. It's a fight between the flesh and the spirit. And then much less Satan is tempting us to follow self because it's direct disobedience to God, and he doesn't want us to obey God. So he's tempting us to disobey God. So yeah, we face it directly from our flesh, and then Satan's also tempting us. What motivates us to deny self?
Well, to be honest, some of the times the discipline that will follow, if you don't. That shouldn't be our primary motive, but that is why, some of the times, why I do what I do, because I know what's going to happen. But it should be out of a love and gratitude to have towards God that should motivate me to have self-denial.
Mm-hmm.
At times, there is also the prospect of a reward for doing so. Paul looked forward to the crown of life. He buffeted his body so that he wouldn't be disqualified. Even in the natural realm, we can understand to some degree with the concept of delayed gratification. Sometimes if you wait for something, it's that much more significant.
Yeah, good point.
Sometimes it's on non-spiritual issues. You can deny yourself of something to make someone else happy. So there's rewards. I guess there was mentioned rewards. There's rewards there. I mean, I'll give you some examples that would involve you, but I mean, that's like saying a married person, you could make sacrifices, things that you would like to do in order to produce unity or happiness or whatever in the home, or it's a non-spiritual issue, just daily things. So there is rewards.
I found it interesting at Chris and Ada met a certain man Tuesday morning in the kitchen, and he had a large jar of water, and he said he drinks a lot of water when he's fasting. He said, I haven't eaten since Sunday night. I'm planning to eat tonight. And then he said he doesn't fast for spiritual reasons. He fasts for health. Because if he can't deny himself for as long as he decided, he doesn't feel guilty about it. So he was fasting for health reasons. So yeah, he said it's not for spiritual reasons, but I fast for health reasons. And I thought that was interesting. So he was denying himself, and it wasn't for spiritual.
But there he was still looking for rewards. Like he wanted to, yeah.
He said he feels better if he does that.
It's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that much about, I mean, I had thought about, like in our Christian life, if we deny self, our rewards, it's heaven, obviously. But all the, like, when we do deny ourselves, our reward is, or a lot of times there's rewards with that. Because, like, if we just do it because Jesus said we need to, that's not going to last long term. That might last short term where we're like, well, Jesus said we have to, so we're going to do it. It needs to come out of a heart of love and obedience to Jesus. I'd say mostly out of a heart of love for Jesus, that's why we need to deny self, or why we do deny self. Anytime through it, if you have questions, just fire away. If I don't give you time, just put your hand up and we'll give you a moment. Where should we look for examples of self-denial? Should we look in the world around us, or should we look in the Bible, or what's the world's viewpoint on, I mean, I guess I don't know if you'd say what's their viewpoint on self-denial or the lack of, you could say, I guess. What would society teach us?
I actually think a lot of athletes deny themselves just for that hero moment, for that winning moment.
Especially Olympians. They train for years. lose their life for it.
You asked what the society would teach us. Today, it's pretty evident they teach us that I deserve it.
Mhm.
It's my right, it's mine. That would have nothing to do with self-denial, that attitude. It's opposing Christ.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought about or found. They're all about self-fulfillment. You deserve it, so go get it. I mean, most of you probably know Nike's saying, just do it. And that's how they feel a lot about it. They just do it. Like, if you feel you deserve it, do whatever it takes to get it. And anytime somebody stands in their way, they obviously get upset, and there's fighting that goes on because of that. Something you said about athletes and how they deny self. I was listening to a podcast a bit today about a Navy SEAL, and I don't know how many of you know that much about them, but it's very intriguing on everything that they go through. And many times they deny self. The guy that was speaking, it's a 2-year process they go through. And when he started, there was 173, and when they graduated, there's only 13 left. That's a huge percentage that dropped out. There was days where they wouldn't give up. The trainers would say, we have to have 5 guys that drop out today before we're going to give you a break. And some of that was laying in cold water, and some people got hyperthermia, and until 3 guys, however many they said were supposed to drop out, they had to stay in that cold water. There's just different things he was talking about. And then he was saying when he graduated, he made it through. When he got to the day of graduation, he said it was the biggest disappointment he ever faced, because he finally attained what he was going for. And he said it was just empty. And I had to think about how that compares to it doesn't compare to our Christian life. Heaven is worth so much. When we get there, it'll be worth it. Every ounce of self-denial that we face. Not like his. Once he got there, he didn't have anything more to look forward to totally. So he finally attained his goal, and it was empty. That's not what we face with denying ourselves here on earth. We have heaven to look forward to, and it won't be empty. It'll be worth it. Okay, we talked about earthly examples. Let's have some examples in the Bible of people that denied self.
All but one of the passages that you read have the context of Jesus talking about his own death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was first on my list. He's the one that gave the most. He gave all the riches of heaven. He gave comfort, popularity, ease, just to come to this earth to suffer and to teach us, to die for our sins, because that was God's plan, and he was willing to deny self to fulfill God's plan.
I think of Joseph in the Old Testament time when he was there serving various different activities at Potiphar's house and all these different places where he went. He could have said, well, what's the point? I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I be doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Yet he still served God where God had placed him. And then later he became their ruler. So there are benefits of having self-denial. Not saying you're always going to become a ruler, but there are, at the end result, as far as it's going to be heaven, if you stay true and faithful to the Lord.
Yeah, there again we see there was a reward for denying self.
Moses rejected the pleasures of Egypt for a season.
Right. He had a pretty promising earthly career there in Egypt, and he left all that to lead the children of Israel.
Daniel denied the king's meat that was taken to Babylon.
Mm-hmm. Still quite a few others. I mean, we don't have to mention them all.
David denied on killing Saul. He just cut off the piece of his garment. I'm sure his body wanted to take care of him, but he knew that's not what God wanted him to do.
Yeah, it's one I hadn't thought about.
So if we can't refrain all the way, we just cut a little bit.
It didn't wound Saul at all, though. He wasn't allowed to touch Saul.
Didn't you regret that? You cut that little bit off?
Yeah, he did.
That doesn't give you right to do a little bit, Harold, either. So, every situation's different. And I'm not saying David did what was perfectly right either.
Another example from the life of David was when he craved a drink of water from the well in Bethlehem. And when his mighty men brought back the water, he poured it out before the Lord, saying, I can't drink this because it's the price of bloodshed. These men risked their lives to bring this to me. He denied himself the pleasure of drinking that water.
Mm-hmm.
The
Very good
disciples
one.
denied themselves of a career. If you look at Peter and Andrew, if you read the passage, it says that the servants with their father followed Jesus. Well, obviously, they had a pretty big business because most of the fishers at that time would have been, one or two people in the boat. So obviously, they had more going on than the average person if they left that all. They laid that down and followed Jesus.
Yeah, they're ones I have down. And they still amaze me how they left all and they followed Jesus. They had no clue what they were getting themselves into in life. I'm sure they probably had a house before, and now they had no place to lay their head.
Jeremiah, God told him point blank, therefore you shall speak all these words to them, but they will not obey you. You shall also call to them, but they will not answer you.
And he still denied himself and still went. Another one I had to think of was Saul, which was later Paul then. He denied himself on the road to Damascus. He left all his, I believe he would have had a career that he had going for him, and he left that to do what Jesus wanted for him.
Did he have an option?
I believe he
I mean,
did.
if you would have been struck down by a light and all that, made blind and that, would you have chose anything different? I think he did. He had a mighty work from the Lord, but it doesn't necessarily take that in our lives and allow the Lord to work in our lives. We just simply need to heed whatever God tells us to do.
So you're saying he's not human? He wasn't human?
I was thinking, when did God ever make someone become a Christian? It was still his choice. As we looked at examples, I had to think of the opposite of self-denial was self-interest or self-indulgence. There are several different examples in the Bible. One I had to think of Achan and how he saw that Babylonian garment and the shekels of silver and gold. He saw, he coveted, and he took and he hid. And it cost many people their lives because of it. So there's an example of someone that did not deny self. He put himself ahead of God and essentially the children of Israel too, because it cost them something because of it. Elisha's servant he was another one I thought of when he went out and talked to Naaman, and then he saw all the riches and the gifts, and he ran after him and wanted it. He did not deny self, and there was consequences for for not denying self with that. Why practice self-denial? We covered that a little bit already, but
Well, for one thing, selfish people are not happy. So if you pursue self, you're not going to find happiness. You're going to isolate yourself. The price is high.
Romans 8:18 would have a little something to do with that. For I reckon that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. That would show if we're selfish now, we won't get that glory. But like you said, selfish people are never nice to be around, so we're going to most likely be isolated and we're not happy. People who practice self-denial, as a rule, are content, prosperous, and happy people. Matthew 10:38 was said already, or was read. He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me, he is not worthy of me. Actually, I'm not sure if that one was read. But self-denial is essential to godly living. Cannot live godly without denying self.
When the rich young ruler came to Jesus and wondered what he needed to do in order to inherit eternal life, what happened? Jesus told him what he needed to do, but he was not willing to sell what he had. He had great possession, evidently, and his heart was upset on it because he would not do that. His end result, I don't know what happened later on. We don't really know everything, but Jesus actually said something to the effect that it's easier for a rich man, for as going to the needle's eye and all that, as far as camel to the needle eye, and the actual rich man to get to heaven because of setting your heart on your riches. And that's what I would call self-denial. If you have your priorities set right.
Mm-hmm.
Another individual I think of had a problem, and many of us probably do, and that's Ahab. And that's what he was pouting. Grown man, think about it. Laying there in his bed, he should have been out there doing something. Can you imagine a grown person doing that? I can't have what I want, so I'm going to cry about it.
Yeah, I can probably imagine that.
Couldn't you get that? Sorry, Aaron.
Stay public.
I know.
Internally, I'm sure we've done that.
But it goes to show what happens if it's not self-denial, how we look at ourselves and what the outcome will be.
I understood that people that practice self-denial are prosperous. Is that materially or spiritually?
Oh, it can be both ways, but we're not guaranteed it. I think there's a point physically also that if we practice self-denial and we're not out there just selfishly living, even in our businesses, there's that greater chance of being prosperous, but it's not that we're guaranteed that we're going to prosper. But I would say definitely in our Christian life.
The worst thing is to look for the rewards. Jesus died on the cross, no reward for himself. The reward is for me and you. You're going to look for the reward you can get.
In other words, don't look too far ahead in life. No, we need to look ahead, but don't focus on what we get out of it. I guess that comes back to selfishness. If we are focusing on what we can get out of it.
It depends. He did endure the cross, despise the shame.
for the joy that was set before him. And one of the Psalms was applied to him in the book of Hebrews, talking about him delighting to do God's will. So there's a sense in which that was a kind of reward. Perhaps sometimes we look for the wrong kind of reward. Perhaps sometimes the reward that we can look for is one that God has promised. Not that we deserve it, that He's good, merciful, loving, and wants to give it.
So there, Jesus was looking at at God's viewpoint of it, and it was a reward. Like, Jesus saw his reward in it, and that was to bring his children home with him. But maybe there was no physical reward or earthly reward, but there was a reward. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes we focus on the wrong. We get too earthly minded, you could say.
I was thinking of the two men that went out to pray. The one said, I fast twice a week and, I'm not like these sinners. And the other was a publican. He didn't even lift his head. Think about the one that was denying himself, fasting twice a week. I think we need to be careful what our motive is, because there's other verses in Ecclesiastes that we could think on as well. Every man also to whom God has given riches and wealth and has given him power to eat thereof and to take his portion. So what is our portion? Do we need to deny ourselves if God has given it to us? And then it also says, sorrow is better than laughter. There's always going to be that tension, but I think if our motive is right, it will be clear to us, that we deny ourselves here, and God has given this as a blessing, and we're partake of it gratefully. Mm-hmm. But we don't indulge and use it selfishly.
Kind of brings me to a question that I thought of. Is there a form of ungodly self-denial?
Yes, Matthew 6. Talks about the hypocrites blowing a trumpet before them when they do their charitable deeds. Talks about disfiguring their faces or making it evident somehow that they're fasting to get the praise of men. But as far as reward goes, that's all the reward they get. But back to what Delbert said, if our motive is right, 3 times Jesus said that your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly.
Mm-hmm.
That brings up the question, Father will reward you openly, does that mean here, or is that talking in heaven?
What y'all think?
The Testament talks about in the life that now is and the life that is to come. Very rewarded.
But if we start focusing on our reward here on earth, we start looking for it, that doesn't mean God won't give it, but there's that chance He sees that our motives are starting to be wrong again, that we're starting to look for our reward here on earth. So if we can keep our mindset totally on God's work and God's kingdom, He might reward us here on earth, but we aren't waiting around for it. If we are, we're going to be disappointed if He doesn't give us what we think we want.
If we're doing it only for reward, we're basically selfish now.
Yeah. I mean, we are.
The guaranteed reward that we have, though, is that we can have joy in our heart that we're doing what God has asked us to do. And I think that's something that we can seek after without being selfish or expecting too much, or that's just something we can basically have a guarantee that we'll have if we're living faithful lives for God. I mean, it may not be monetary or earthly treasures, but if that's what we're looking for, then I think our heart's in the wrong place anyhow.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thought.
That kind of goes back to your previous question too, of how the world views self-denial. So many times in the world, yeah, they practice self-denial, but it's always practicing self-denial for what I can get out of it, not what I can give others or what I can do for God. It's always it comes back to me, whether it's athletes getting praise and glory, or whether it's people starting businesses, trying to become millionaires. They might practice self-denial, but it's all about me.
I agree. I thought about like these people that, I guess you call them bodybuilders, that get fit and everything. You know, sometimes we're like, wow, the discipline that they have, or the denial that they go through or whatever, but they're after their physique. I mean, they're after looking good and that, so they're still after their own fulfillment, even though they are practicing self-denial. I think about, is it possible to live our Christian life and not practice total self-denial? I think it is. How many times in our lives do we tell God, yeah, I'll deny self here and there, but is there still something in our life that we hold on to dearly that we do not deny ourselves of? And each of us have to fill in the blank ourselves what it is. But I just have to think of that as a challenge we have to give everything. We can't just deny some things and not other things. We have to deny self the whole way. Real quickly, some things that we need to deny in our lives. We need to deny those things that are absolutely sinful. We go to Colossians 3, talks about the sins there, like the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and all those different ones. Those are sins that we know, or that are named out in the Bible. We need to deny ourselves of those. There's other things that in themselves are not wrong, but like in Romans 14, Paul was talking about how if it offended his brother, if he ate meat, he wouldn't eat it. So in and of itself, eating meat was not wrong, but because it offended his brother, Paul said he won't do it. So there's things that we need to deny ourselves of at times to keep our brothers from falling. Things that stand in the way of our highest usefulness. What about our money? Do we sacrifice sometimes here on earth? I don't know if I want to start mentioning, but like maybe we could drive a little older vehicle, we could save some money there. That's a whole discussion of its own, so people wouldn't claim that's saving money. Whatever it is, do we waste our money, or do we save it to use it for God's kingdom, to further his kingdom? Do we deny ourselves of things like that? Do we deny ourselves of sleep at times to help someone out, or our agenda? Sometimes that strikes home the closest because we like to do what we want to do. But are we willing to deny ourselves of what we had planned to help somebody in need? In conclusion, I'm going to read James 1:12. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. The giving up of the joys of the sinful life admits one first into the realms of the foretaste of heaven, and finally to the realities of the everlasting joys of heaven itself. So here we see in James about if blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life. It's a promise. It's not saying that you might get it, but it says God promises that we'll receive the crown of life if we're faithful until the end. And there's always a way out of temptations. So it's always remembered to deny self, no matter what it is, even when we don't feel like it, because of our love and obedience to God. Thank you for your thoughts.